So for 1.7, this is called inequalities. Okay, so stay up here with me, please. Okay, and then like I told you, we are going to be solving nonlinear inequalities. So that includes quadratics. And there is a process to doing this. Okay, which is why you can see there's a lot of information boxes on the front. Okay, so these are coming directly from your textbook. When you're solving inequalities that have squares or other powers of your variable, we are going to use factoring with this principle, okay, called the sign of a product or a quotient. Okay, so this says if a product or a quotient, okay, so when you multiply or divide, if it has an even number of negative factors, then the value is positive. Okay, this is something that you guys already know, because when you multiply an even number of negatives, you always get what? A positive. So this is just saying if there's an even number of negatives, it's going to be a positive. Okay, that's all that is trying to say. For this one, they're going to tell you that if there's an odd number of negatives, okay, factors are being divided, that's when it's going to be a negative. Okay, so if a product or quotient has an odd number of negative factors, that's when your factor is negative. So we're going to be setting up tables, and we're going to be using that principle in the tables. For your notes, I wrote the tables out for you. I'm also going to show you how you can put it on a number line so that you don't have to make a table for everyone in your assignment, which is something you might have done in Algebra 2 as well. So your first step, these are the guidelines. Again, this is an information box from your textbook. So you want to move all your terms to one side. Okay, what you want is you want one side to be 0. Okay, and then if you have division 1, it's going to look like a fraction. You still want to move everything to one side. Okay, it has to have all non-zero items on one side so that the other side is 0. That's when we can use these product properties. Then you are going to factor. You are going to find the intervals. So you have to find where these key values are 0. I'm going to walk you through all of this. Okay, and then it divides the line into different intervals. Okay, so you guys recently just did this on your quiz, okay? So when you have like 2 values on the number line, we'll call them A and B. Okay, it's going to be negative infinity to A. And when you guys were doing this, we always use the soft bracket. Sometimes you might have that. Other times now you're going to have the hard bracket. And then remember how you connect it with a union. And then it would go from A to B. This would be our second interval. And then our third interval would be B to infinity. Okay, so when I say you're splitting them into intervals, each one of these is an interval. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Oh, yeah, they're all hard brackets. The only soft brackets for this one are infinity. And some of you might be wondering, okay, well, how can this be a hard bracket and this be a hard bracket? It can't. So what we have to do is we have to do different tests, because one of the intervals is going to be true, one's going to be false, the other one's going to be true. Some of you might start remembering that that's a pattern that we had last year, so that might start coming back to you. Okay, so we're going to make a table or a diagram, and I'm going to show you how to make it from the, I'm going to show you how to make that from the number line. And then we are going to use test values to make a table. Okay, and we're going to pick test values in the intervals. Okay, and then once you pick the test values, you are going to determine the signs of the product or the quotient. And then the last thing you're going to do is solve. Okay, so the solving is you are determining the solution from one side to the other. You can highlight your decisions over here. Okay, so determine the solution of the inequality from the last row of the sign. And then that's going to change from problem to problem as well. Okay, so you are solving the nonlinear inequality, express the solution using interval notation, and you are going to graph the solution set. Okay, when you are doing this, I need to see your steps, okay, for how you are solving. Okay, we are solving using algebra. So remember, your work is your proof. That's your evidence. So that's what we got to show. So we have x squared minus x minus 2 is less than 0. All right, so we're going to go through the steps. Step 1, move all terms to one side. Okay, that step is done. It's already done for us, okay? So step 2 is we are going to factor. So it has to multiply to x squared, x and x, multiplies to negative 2, and then adds to negative 1. So I need a negative 2 and a positive 1. Does not matter what order you put them in. So you can do plus 1 and minus 2. I'm going to keep that. Okay, and then for step 3, when you're finding the intervals, you have to find the key values. The key values are where each factor is 0. Okay, so it's really like you're solving. If it's x minus 2, what would you plug in for x that would make that 0? Yep. And then this one would be negative 1. Now, when you put them on the number line, you have to put them in the proper order. So numerically, you have to put the negative 1 first. Okay, and then you will put the 2. And this is going to help you for the visualizing. Notice here that you just have a less than. If there's no equal to, you're going to use a soft bracket or a parenthesis. Okay, so there's no equal to, so it's going to be a soft bracket. So when you create the intervals, it's going to be negative 1 or negative infinity to negative 1. And then we're not going to put the unions on there yet. We're just going to identify what the intervals are. Okay, so we need to find which one of these intervals is going to produce the correct result. So in the table, I just want you to organize these intervals. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we are going to find the signs of our 2 factors. So our factors are x minus 2 and x plus 1. You don't have to put the parentheses there. In fact, I'm going to stop doing it in the next one. Okay, but this is where your factors are going to go. Okay, and then you just have to pick a number that is in the interval, and we're going to write that above. So we call these our test points or our test values. So our test points for the first interval has to be in between negative infinity or negative 1. What would you guys like to choose? All right. And then between negative 1 and 2, 0. 2 to infinity, perfect. Okay, so I would always pick whole numbers if I can. Sometimes that might not be possible. And then you can never pick the key values. The reason why is because you see how key values appear in both of them? So that's going to be an indeterminate spot, so don't pick any of your key values. All right, and then for this one, I'm going to write down what I'm doing in my head, and then in the rest of them, we'll just do it in our head. So you're plugging this in for x. So if you have negative 2 minus 2, it's negative 4. And so what you would just put in your chart is it's a negative. Okay, and then if you plug in negative 2 plus 1, that's negative 1, and you would just put it's a negative. So the only thing you have to worry about are the signs. Okay, the only thing you have to worry about are the signs. Can you give me 1 second? And then what I want you to understand is that these two are being multiplied together here. See how it's x minus 2 times x plus 1? So you're trying to find a sign of their product. So that's why it doesn't even matter what the numbers are. If you do a negative times a negative, what's your result going to be? A positive. Okay, and then Annie, you still got your question?
I think so because values that are outside the x minus 2 and the x plus 1.
Nope, so you got to pick your values that are inside your interval here. So it has to be somewhere between negative infinity or negative 1. So you could choose negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. You can pick which value. Okay, and then so for 0, when you plug that in to your factor, you have 0 minus 2. So is 0 minus 2 a negative or a positive? Negative. Okay, 0 plus 1, is that a negative or a positive? Positive. Okay, so a negative times a positive is a negative. Okay, and then can you guys fill out the last column? And then we'll talk about what the favorable answer is. Okay, so if you plug in 3, 3 minus 2 is 1, that's a positive value. 3 plus 1 is 4, that's a positive value. And then a positive times a positive is a positive value. Do you guys know what the solution or solutions are going to be for this? And why? Negative what? So it's either the positives or the negatives. How do you think we can choose? It's going to be based on your equation. So look at your original. It says this is less than 0. So if it's less than 0, your solution is going to be what? Yep, so if it's less than 0, your solution is the negative intervals. That is not always the case. So depending on what your sign is, you're going to have to change based on what it is. So you're not always looking for positives or always looking for negatives. Okay, so your negative intervals are the solution. Okay, so for this case, this is the negative result. So then this is your solution, and then we're going to put that on our number line. So for your solution, what you would write is negative 1, comma 2, and then it says that we have to graph the solution set. I'm perfectly fine with you just doing a number line with your key values on it. And then this would be an open circle at each. Because of the less than, you have the open circles. And negative 1 to 2 is how you are connecting. So the result was a negative. you're multiplying. Okay, so for part B, I'm going to give you the equation, and I want you to do your first couple steps. Okay, so go ahead and move everything over, do your factoring. Okay, so our first step was to move everything to one side and then to factor. So if you subtract the 1 over, then you can factor. You have to start with 2x, and x has to multiply to a negative 1. So that means 1 has to be positive, 1 has to be negative. We're going to guess and check. So this would be 2 minus 1. That will give you a positive 1. Okay, and now we find our two key values. So our key values are whatever makes this 0. You can always set it equal to 0 and solve if you're unsure, right? You add the 1, divide by 2. So 1/2 is going to be one of our values. The other value is negative 1, which a lot of you will see right away. And then when you're putting it on your number line, the order matters. Now you need to check your sign to see if you have hard brackets or soft brackets. So because you have the equal to, you have to use your hard brackets here. Okay? And I'm fine with you just doing this here. Negative infinity to negative 1, hard bracket. This is where it's coming from. And then it goes from negative 1 to 1/2. And then 1/2 to infinity. Okay, now remember, not all of these intervals are going to be solutions. We have to find test points so we can test to see which one, in this case, we got to look here. So we're looking for the positive intervals or the negative for this one. We have this whole thing is, yep, so we're looking for the positive intervals. So if you look at the sign, see how this is greater than or equal to 0? That's how you know it'll be a positive interval. And it'll change. Yes. Yep. And then you guys are going to do your test points. Okay, please identify what test point you are using. You do not have to use the same ones that I do, but it is common to use the next whole number. Negative 1 and 1/2. 0 would be a great one. 1 would be a great one here. And then when you're filling in the chart, remember, you're using your two factors. Okay, so this is negative 4 minus 1. That's a negative. Negative 2 plus 1 results in a negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. You plug in 0, you get negative 1. Here you get positive. That's a negative. 2 minus 1 is a positive. This is a positive. So when you multiply, you get a positive. Okay, we are looking for the positive intervals this time. Okay, so these result in our positive products. Okay, it's based on this. So if this is positive, you're using that interval. Okay, so the way that we would write out our solution, I know I put step 5 here, I'm going to write it here. So your solution would be negative infinity to negative 1, and then if you have more than one interval, you have to connect it with a union. So make sure you put the U in there, that you have that proper notation. Okay, and then like I said, with your number lines, I'm fine if you do this here. And then this time you're going to have a closed circle because you have the brackets. And a closed circle. Okay, so this is negative infinity to negative 1. This is 1/2 to positive infinity. All right, what questions do you guys have for me on those? Yes. Yep, so if you have the equal to, it's going to be greater than. And then when you're doing this on your homework, Do you guys see how I like do that number line there? You had me last year, maybe you remember this. So what I do is I write the intervals here, and then I just make this into my table. So like negative infinity to negative 1, right? And then you can just do your table like that. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yes. Yep. So it's not your solution, so you don't have to worry about putting that in there. Okay, and then your official solution will happen. All right. Now for part C, pick things up a notch here. We have x cubed. Oh yeah, we got this. Okay, so you last year you did do the quadratics, but we did not do any cubics that I recall. So x cubed minus 8x squared is greater than or equal to negative 15x. Your first step still the same. We're going to move everything to one side. Okay, and let's think about what we're going to do when we factor. Yeah, when you factor, you always want to take out your GCF, right? So your greatest common factor is x. Okay, and I'll give you a moment so that you can factor that. And then this time, you're going to have 3 key values, and the 3 key values are going to produce 4 intervals. So we're actually going to split one of our intervals on your table. So I don't think that's okay, and then what do we get for these two? Hope you got minuses for both, right? Oh. Because you have a positive here and a negative here. Okay, doesn't matter what order you put those in. It only matters what order you put them on the chart. Now, don't forget x. What makes x 0? 0. So you should have 0, 5, and 3. And then that means we're going to have, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 intervals. So let's just split this first one in half, okay? Sure, you can split the last one in half. Okay, so your first interval, and are we going to have hard brackets or soft brackets? Yeah. You have the equal to, so it's negative infinity to 0. And then 0 to 3. Okay, so this here is negative infinity to 0. From here to here is 0 to 3. Then you have 3 to 5. And then you have 5 to infinity. Okay, you guys ready to do your test points? And again, just identify what test point you're using. So negative 1 between 0 and 3, what do you guys want to do? 1, 3 to 5, 4, 5 and above. Okay, and then your signs, this time you have three factors. So it's x minus 5, and x minus 3. So you're going to have three signs. Nope, doesn't matter what order. Okay, so then if you plug in -1, it's a negative, and a negative. So remember what we talked about? If there's an odd number of negatives, the result is negative. Okay, if you plug in 1, you get positive, negative, negative. Is there an odd or even amount of negatives here? Even, so it'll be positive. Okay, and then for 4, okay, so positive, negative, positive, so the result is negative, okay, because you have an odd number, and then positive, 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 okay, and then when you are doing that, remember, it depends on this here, whether you're looking for the negatives or positives. So this is greater than or equal to 0. So numbers that are greater than or equal to 0 are positive numbers. So this, you're looking for the positive this time. Were you going to say comments? Okay. Yes, it's exactly that. It is that. Yeah. Because this is telling me what each one is. The factors. Okay, so then your solution, again, if you have more than one interval, you're going to have a union. Okay, and then you are going to use the hard brackets here because of the equal to, but infinity is never going to have that. Do you guys think you can graph that on the number line? Make sure you guys are graphing your number line because I saw a couple of you skip that step, so don't do that. Okay, so you have the, because on your test it'll be the same type of thing. So 5 to infinity starts at 5, goes to infinity. 0 to 3 are two closed circles. Connect them. That's going to be your line. Also, whenever you are graphing, I do want them above. I know when you do that, like in Algebra 1, you put it right on there, but it's just very hard to write. All right, and then the last type you have to know how to do, we talked about the quotient, right? So the last type you have to know how to do is a quotient. So if you have 6 plus x over 6 minus x, and that is greater than or equal to 1, okay, then we are going to do the same first step. Remember, if it's not 0, you have to move it over. So if you move that over, you have 6 plus x over 6 minus x, and you have to subtract the 1, okay? That's your first step. Now, we just did a whole quiz on this, how to get the LCD. That's what we have to do here. We have to get the LCD. Okay, so if it's 1, right, your LCD is just going to be what? Yeah, and let's kind of squeeze the work down here, this stuff. So it would be 6 plus x over, sorry, I didn't give you enough space there. Okay, and then if it's minus 1 over 1, you're going to multiply that by 6 minus x over 6 minus x. Still be greater than or equal to 0. So don't forget that you're going to have to do what with that negative when you multiply it? Yep. Okay, so it's going to be 6 plus x minus 6, and then you have a negative times a negative, so it's going to be plus x on the top. And then let's just simplify this part, and then we'll write the inequality. So look, you have 6 and negative 6, so what happens? Yep, so you're just left with x plus x, which is 2x. Okay, so this is going to be your inequality. 2x over 6 minus x is greater than or equal to 0. Bless you. Okay, and again, this is greater than or equal to 0. So it means it's positive. If the sign is flipped, it will be negative. Okay, and then when you are finding the key terms, okay, the factors are the numerator and the denominator. So your factors are 2x and 6 minus x. And if you want to put them right here, you can. So I'll say that one more time. Your factors are the numerator and the denominator. When we were talking about the rational values, I even told you, like, hey, this is in parentheses, this is in parentheses. Those are the factors. Okay, that's what you're dividing by. Okay, now, when you're doing your key points, okay, the first thing is you have to find what makes this 0. So if it's 2x, what would you plug in for x to make that 0? 0. Okay, for 6 minus x, what would you plug in for x to make it 0? 6. Now, before we talk about the brackets, I'm going to just give you a hint that this one's a little different. Okay, so you see the equal to, which tells you what? Okay, so the equal to tells you that you're going to need hard brackets. There's one thing we also have to keep in mind. Okay, so because this is a fraction, remember that fractions can't have what? Fractions can't have the denominator equal to 0. Okay, so for 6, see how that would make the denominator 0? Okay, so we can't use a hard bracket for that. It has to be a what? Yep. So we're going to do a soft bracket for this one. Okay, and then for 0, you're going to have the hard bracket. Okay, if you want to write yourself a little note about why we're doing that, we're going to have hard brackets because of the equal to for the factors except for what makes the denominator equal to 0, because we can't have that. Okay, so that's why we have to not include it, and that soft bracket, that's how we do not include it. Okay, so we have the 0 and the 6. All right, so this interval here would be negative infinity to 0. That is a hard bracket. Okay, and so you have hard bracket here, soft bracket, soft bracket. Hard bracket for 0, 6 is a soft. Okay, and then the rest of this is just like we did before, so you can go ahead and pick your test points. And then can you write your solution and do the graph? So find your solution and do your graph. Okay, so if you chose -1 like me, then that means you had a negative. And then remember, if you do minus a negative, that's what? Positive. Okay, so that's a negative interval. Here, I just plugged in 1, so I had a positive and a positive, which was a positive. Here I chose 7, so if I plug in 7, I get a positive and a negative, which is a negative. And then again, I'm choosing the positive interval based on this. So we did a lot that were positive, but they're not always going to be like that. And then you just have to write your solution, and then you have to graph it on a number line. Okay, and so if you're doing this on a number line, like I said, I'm fine if you just put 0 and 6, but this is an open circle at 6, closed circle at 0, and this is telling you that all the solutions 0 up till 6 make this true. So if you ever want to check, if you plug in 0, this should be a true statement. Is 6 divided by 6 greater than or equal to 1? Yeah, it is 1, right? If you plugged in 1, 7 over 5, is that greater than or equal to 1? Yes, but yeah, so see how you have the soft bracket there? So you'd have 12 over 0. What happens when you divide by 0? Get an error. Yep, it's indeterminate, so that would not work. And then if you plugged in something here like -1, that wouldn't work either. Okay, 5 over 7 is not greater than or equal to 1. Okay? All right, I'm going to go over questions from yesterday, and then I'm also going to put up your practice from today.